Hello, everyone. Welcome to INK&BLOOD. This is our fourth episode, and in this episode, we are going to discuss Iran. And my name is Emre Uslu.
Mine is Kani Zulam.
Okay, how are we going to approach Iran, Kani?
There are a number of people who say Iran is a country, and there are people who say Iran is a cause. I happen to think Iranian leadership views itself as a cause, and then we could talk about it in terms of the details of this proposal.
Okay, let's just come up with. I think it is better to start with Iran, since Iran had thousands of years of history and cradle of history. I think it is better to not to go that part, although it is related. We cannot really escape from our own history. But I think it is better to start with 1979 with the Iranian Revolution and fast forward and come to today. And in recently we had an election, and surprisingly there is a reformist candidate, and so on and so forth. Can you? I'm sure you have seen many of these developments with your own eyes, and you have your own experience. Where were you in 1979 when the revolution took place? How did you learn?
I was in Turkey. I heard it, I don't know, either on television or on radio. It was a momentous event. I was in my late teens. Yes, I was very much taken by it.
So did you notice anything around you? Did you have any excitement, or because of your background, or did you talk at all, or does it really matter to you at the time?
No, I mean, I guess my my own background was more liberal, more secular, but I lived in a small town, and I remember some people expressing hope, the conservative friends that I had. Um, and years later, I heard some Turkish politicians who are now part of AKP talking about it in terms of they were very ecstatic, they were very happy. They went to Iran to celebrate it. It's next door to Turkey. It definitely affected a lot of people.
Yes, indeed. Although I myself am not, familiar with the exact time, but in 1980s, I remember when I was in part of this Islamic circles. We had a group of friends. We call them Irancı, Iranist, and they were very much admirer of Khomeini, and what they were very happy, and they wanted to bring Iranian revolution to our little town Malatya. And at the same time, interestingly enough, we had also a group of people who we were calling them Wahhabi. It is now I'm thinking from now on. So on the one side, in little town Malatya, I experienced and I had talked with the Khomeini, what we call it, Khomeini or Irancı. Uh, or at the same time, I think, not surprisingly, from now on, we had the scene of Wahhabi, what we call them Wahhabiji at the time. And still, some of them both, by the way, Irancıs and Wahhabijis are in the current AKP circus. I had a friend from childhood friends who are now active in the AKP party. Now I'm seeing, actually at that time I wasn't able to see it. Why do we have on the one hand the Iranji, on the other hand the Wahhabis, one angle in Iran, one angle in Saudi Arabia? Now I realize that rivalry actually brought all the way to my hometown, Malatya, and was affecting me as a child at that time. I think that is why Iran is so important for everybody in the Muslim world, because at this time, especially majority conservatives were very hopeful about the Iranian revolution, but it doomed and failed miserably, and it changed people's hope to misery, and now we're discussing Iran as a source of misery, not only for its own people but also in the region.
Well, Iran, a lot of people who wanted that revolution, um, some of them were very hopeful. Some of them wanted basically the Mossadegh style democracy to come back that was toppled by Americans and by the British in 1953. And Shah had come back and had ruled the country for the next 25 years and had haunted the liberals, the communists, and Americans were happy with him, but the Iranians were not happy with him. And then when initially everybody was against him, but then when the revolution consolidated itself, it really became a sectarian Shiite theocracy. And the Kurds, didn't like the Shah. They had been hurt by it. And then, but when Khomeini and his friends came to power, they also oppressed the Kurds. And then years later, they killed the Kurdish leader Abdurrahman Qasimlu in 1989 in Vienna. They also killed another Kurdish leader and his friends in Berlin. That's the reason I think Iran doesn't act like a state. It acts more like a cause. It doesn't tolerate dissent. It doesn't tolerate opposition. And today it supports Hamas. It supports Hezbollah. It supports Houthis in Yemen. It really wants to transform the region, have a militant Islam in the region.
Yeah, it is because Iran, they consider Iran as a cause, right? It's not a country that confined by border and the principles or rules that is affecting within the border. But Iran, as when you think of Iran as a cause, I think it makes more sense to see this expansionist foreign policy and try to steer everything and everywhere in the Middle East.
Yeah, it's some people could compare it to the Cold War during the the Soviets versus the socialist camp versus the capitalist camp. The Soviets believed, at least Stalin did, in the ultimate victory of the working class dictatorships all over the world. And the Shiites, Khomeini thinks, Islam is the religion, is the best religion. And he thinks Western imperialism has no business in the Middle East. Mind you, Iranians have a history of being abused by Great Britain, being abused by Russia, by then Soviet Union, and then by the US. So there is that history there. We have to admit that. But in the final analysis, if you want peace and stability in the region, I think a country like Iran should act like a country rather than a cause, because when it acts like a cause, it generates instability, it generates chaos, it generates political violence, and political violence is not conducive to representative government, is not conducive to democracy, is not conducive to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Iranian regime, I think the opposition, the diaspora in Iran, or the Western media or Western Western polities in general, also treat Iran like a cause, not a country. Think about this. I'm sure in Washington D.C. area, you're here and I'm here. We have a lot of pro Shah supporters, right? Iranian diaspora, and they also see Iran as a cause, and they never forget this collective memories of Iran, the glorious Iran under the Shah. And many of those Iranian diaspora was born in the United States. I had some friends, and I'm talking with them, and some of them were never seen. Many of them go there regularly and see Iran, but when they come to the United States, they see that the collective memory of Iran, and therefore they revive that collective memory, and then for them it is also a cause, not a country, isn't it?
Well, I think it's too late to bring the Shah back to the system. Iranians want to move towards democracy. They want to move towards a representative government. They want to have, free speech. I think even during the theocracy that's now in Tehran, periodically you have protests. You have Iranians going to the streets. Late as during Mahsa Amini, Jina Mahsa Amini, the Kurdish woman who was beaten to death because she had not the right hijab. Because of the morality police basically arrested her and beat her, and she died in the hospital. The other thing that comes to my mind is, if the West, the Europe, US, Japan, China, are they seeing Iran as a country, or are they seeing Iran as a cause? In the West, there are people who say China and US didn't have a good relationship, and then Nixon and Kissinger paved the way and had established a relationship that's good both for China, and it's also good for US. So they're saying, just like US opened up to China, US should open up to Iran, and US opened up to North Korea, tried to open up to North Korea, and it should try to open up to Iran. There's something to be said about that. I think in the internet age that we live in, there's no way you can stop ideas from finding their way to Tehran, finding their way to Isfahan, finding their way to Mahabad. This idea of a cause, and then during at least Bush administration, when the President Bush, the junior, calling Iran an axis of evil, it doesn't really address the issue. I think in the long run, it's better to engage countries. It's better to interact with them, and then hopefully push them towards greater freedoms that the people of Iran need and the Middle East needs. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, when you think of this, especially the diaspora, many people from diaspora, when they see us criticizing the Shah, and then probably they will bash us. But I think we need to tell the truth, as at least how we see it, or how I see it. And when I see that Shah is touring around in these days and doing diplomacy and trying to restore its old order, and I think he receives some sort of legitimacy. But anyone who remembers Iran, or anyone who reads Iran, I think Shah was not a legitimate leader in 1979. And it was not an Islamic people, but everybody was against Shah, and he was not legitimate. And I think it was only possible for Shah to stay in power because of the United States at the time, under the Cold War context. But now, when we think of Iran, and I see the following: Iran's domestic politics, because Iranian leadership sees Iran as a cause, and therefore it becomes a kind of interesting twist here. An Iranian regime and political elites are much more susceptible to the Western pressure, isn't it? So when we think of whether the pressure from diaspora or pressure from the West, including sanctions, including all everyday criticisms, determines their politics, then the demand from within the people, isn't it? So I see here, for instance, the most recent election, I think it was by design. They allow this Masoud Pezeshkian to win because of the pressure, Mahsa Amini protesters from within, and especially the supporters of the West and diaspora and all others, and force this regime to adapt or react based on how the West sees the country or regime in Iran. Do you agree, disagree?
Well, I'll say two things. The people who are abroad are not just the supporters of Shah. They're also the supporters of democracy. They rejected the Shah. They cooperated with Khomeini to bring about a democratic system. But then when Khomeini, consolidated his base and basically declared a theocracy, they fled, they left. Some of them live in America, some of them live in California, as you know. So the demand for Iran to change comes from at least two groups, both the Democrats as well as the monarchists. The other thing I would say is Iran, for the first time, had its constitutional revolution in 1906, if my memory serves me right, and then had an experiment for 6 years, for 5 years, and then it was crushed. But then the parliament, the Majlis, was allowed, and Mossadegh time, the Shah was able to work with him, but then there was a conflict with Great Britain. The oil, 16% of the profit was given to Iran, and then 84% of the profit was withheld by Great Britain. Whereas Mossadegh and his friends wanted to nationalize this national asset called the oil. As far as today, I think, I don't think you could call Iran a democracy in the sense like, let's say, a democracy in Denmark or a democracy in France. Only the clerics approved people can run for elections. Again, just like in the Soviet Union, the Communist Party members were able to run for the elections. So the true freedom, the true election, a democracy that protects freedom, doesn't exist in Iran, unfortunately. But it goes through the exercise of periodic elections, periodic election of the president. And while that is good, if there's an opening, if there are true reforms, then Iran could make a transition to a better representative government. But I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, I see since 1979, Iran is always like a pendulum between reform and revolution. It always goes, and this way, I think this is by design, because pretty much the supreme leader controls Iranian foreign policy and Iran's election system and so on and so forth. When the criticism from the West comes too much, and I think he let it go toward the side of reformist, and then once he find a place, or once they find a place, and if they think that it is too much reformist, and they just pull it back to the reform side. So Iran is like in last 45 years since this revolution, it's like a pendulum between the two. But now, when we think of Iran as a country, where everyday people struggles with different countries, right? So from within in the eyes of people in Iran, and of course they don't, I think some of them, of course, may see Iran as a cause, but majority of them see Iran as a country, right? And let's say the Kurds and minorities and women, how do they see Iran?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Iran is a minority majority country, meaning Persians are actually in minority, meaning Kurds, Azeris, Baluchis, Arabs constitute the majority of the population. Women, they have the right to vote, but they're not viewed as equal. There are massive issues in terms of inheritance laws, in terms of whether they can be witnesses or not. So those are the issues that the Iranian society faces, and goes as they live, they address these issues, they express, they go through protests, they periodically elect people that they think are going to serve their needs. In the long run, though, the other thing I want to point out is, for example, Hamas is a Sunni sectarian group that is in power in Gaza and is heavily supported by Iran. Hamas is a Sunni group. It's not really a Shiite group. The theocracy in Tehran is a Shiite theocracy. but their dislike of Israel is so strong that they are willing to, close their eyes and support a Sunni group that, so long as it hurts Israel. And that, turns it into a cause. And, for a cause, it's not the means that matter, it's the end that
Yeah.
matters. So that becomes the source of instability in the region. During Afghanistan, Al Qaeda, Iran didn't like it, Americans didn't like it, and Americans and Iranians actually for a while cooperated when Americans went to Afghanistan and toppled Taliban. But in the Middle East, unfortunately, Iran, as we speak, is supporting Hamas and causing a lot of instability in the region.
Well, at the same time, I mean, don't go back to the Al Qaeda era. Iran and the United States also cooperated to defeat ISIS, and Iran and the United States most recently in this year they cooperated to limit Iranians' attack against Israel, wasn't it? That the United States and Donald Trump even admitted that they communicated with Iran to make sure that their missiles is not going to hit American soldiers when when he killed Qasem Soleimani. Remember in that episode? I'm sure our viewers also remember when Donald Trump killed Qasem Soleimani, the head of their
Al-Quds force.
Yeah, Quds forces, and then Iran had to retaliate, but they hit simply empty fields in Iraq to show the legitimacy of the regime in the eyes of their own people. So Iran and the United States, for in many occasions, are cooperating.
I mean, the Republicans usually, when they come to power, their relationship with Iran becomes a little bit colder. When Democrats are in power, during Obama, during Clinton, Madeleine Albright was the first Secretary of State to basically apologize for what America had done in 1953 in toppling, a democratically elected leader, Mossadegh. So the yeah, I mean, if you ask for my opinion, it's good for them, for both sides, not to raise the tension, to lower the temperature. I think the Middle East doesn't need more wars, it doesn't need more violence. If they could cooperate, it would be better. But in the elections that we have coming up, if Trump comes to power, yeah, it's going to be unpredictable again, I think.
Yeah, I mean, since you mentioned Democrats cooperating, I also wanted to bring your attention to Ronald Reagan. He also cooperated with the dirty game to finance or sell American weapons to Iranians and Iranian regime right after the revolution, by the way, in 1980s, to finance the guerrillas or repress the guerrillas in Nicaragua. So it really doesn't matter when it comes to their own interests, and they can cooperate. And we have seen both Republicans and Democrats cooperated. But still, yeah, Iran is more or less, especially in the media, is seen as an axis of evil, and they cause the problem. And when we look at the people's, we're discussing in the eyes of the people. I wanted to ask you the Kurdish reaction, how the Kurds see Iran, Iran today under Islamic regime and Iran under the Shah. And is it really different? Because now with the current president, Masoud Pezeshkian, is originally from a Turkic background, but grew up in Kurdish town, and he's able to speak Kurdish. Unlike many Turkish leaders, by the way, they never bother to learn Kurdish. Now we have an Iranian leader, an interesting background, and who comes from Turkic background, speak Kurdish, and will lead Iran. Does it really make a difference among the ordinary Kurdish life in Iranian Kurdistan?
Well, in 1941, Iran was divided between Great Britain and the Soviet Union because the Shah was having a relationship with Hitler, and both countries didn't think it was a good idea to leave Iran alone. So they divided the country into two. And Soviet Union was there for 5 years, from 41 to 46. It established two republics, the Mahabat Republic of Kurdistan and then the Republic of Azerbaijan. And they basically had self-rule for 5 years, from 41 to 46. And then in 46, Stalin was forced out, and Shah and his supporters, his army came and crushed both the republic in Azerbaijan as well as in Kurdistan. The Kurds never really had a good relationship with the Shah, even though Shah did not put forward in terms of the religious ideology of Iran. For Shah, we are all Aryans. We're big, the grandchildren of a big empire. But the Kurds were having problems with him, just like the other groups did. And in 79, when Khomeini came, the Kurds thought they could maybe have autonomy in Kurdistan and then freedom in Iran. Basically, they could have their own autonomous region. But Khomeini and his followers said no. Today, I would say the Kurds are leery because they are Sunni and the theocracy in Tehran is Shiite. So religiously speaking, they're two different sects. So they have been clamoring during the Jina Masa Amini. Many Kurdish towns were protesting. So I would say even today the hope is the central government in Tehran will get weaker, so that the Kurds and the Azeris and the Baluch and the Arabs will have more political space and more room to express themselves. As far as the new leader is concerned, it's great that he speaks Kurdish. If he allows, Kurdish universities to be opened up, if he allows more space, political space for the Kurds, I think Kurds will be happier. But we don't know. We'll see what happens.
Since we're in almost time, and let me ask you, or my observation, and then I want to hear your observation as well. When I listen the Iranian diaspora, and they act as if the regime is going to topple down tomorrow, always hopeful that the regime is going to go. And when I read the Western media, and they portray the regime as if it's going to go sooner, maybe not tomorrow, maybe next year. But when I look at from within, and when you look at from the eyes of the people, when you look at the experts who actually have an access inside Iran, they don't consider and they don't think that Iranian regime is going to go anytime soon. And Iranian regime is a regime that they can resist, and they've been able to resist this heavy sanctions since 2008 under Obama, and they will continue to resist. And not only they resist, but also they start expanding their influence, especially with the Hamas operations or Houthis. And even they're supporting some Kurds in the region, and we have seen the fingerprints of Iran's everywhere in the Middle East. And therefore, I don't think that Iran and the Iranian regime will not go anywhere anytime soon. And maybe they would reinforce themselves, the political elite. And most recent elections show that at least in the second round, 50% of the people participated, which was unexpected for many of the outsiders. But I've seen the durability of the regime, and it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. How do you see?
Yeah. You know, in Angela Merkel's biography, she says, I was on the other side of the Berlin Wall, and I thought I will never see it come down. I will live behind it for all my life. And then it came down. uh, in the Middle East, you know, it's if the governments want to prolong their lives, they need to, you know, invest in people. They need to be just towards the people,
Absolutely.
and they need to accommodate their aspirations. Um, I don't know if Iran. I can't say Iran is on that trajectory. It's still angry. It still wants to stir up trouble in the region. It wants to increase its sphere of influence, and you know, I don't know if Sunnis will tolerate that. I mean, the Saudis, you know, want if they say if Iran wants nuclear weapons, we have to have our own nuclear weapons. Israel has their own nuclear weapons. Um, so I don't really see stability in the horizon. I see more unpredictability and instability, if you will.
I mean, yeah, instability is an interesting word. Interesting wording. Yes, I don't see stability and absolute regime domination. Iran will continue to be unstable regime, but I don't think that the regime is going to go anywhere anytime soon, too.
Yeah, I guess we'll wait and see.
Okay, thank you, Connie. See you next week.
Thank you.
Okay.